here, Robbie, the first thing that we speak is about spend profile or ABC analysis. Could you please tell us exactly how do you do an ABC analysis?
Yeah, Arjun, happily I will. Most purchasing organizations are all talking about strategic sourcing and strategic purchasing. And the first step in starting strategic sourcing or strategic purchasing is to develop something that is called a spend profile, or to get a very accurate understanding of all the money that is spent on the outside for all goods and services. Not only how much money is spent, but what categories is it spent in, who is it spent with, which parts of our organization are spending it. Only then can we really begin to think strategically. And my experience has been that many of the organizations I've worked with as a consultant have not yet developed such a profile. So the first step in starting a strategic sourcing effort is develop the spend profile, because from this spend profile, we now have the opportunity to develop the ABC analysis, or another name for that is the Pareto analysis. One of the things we know about every purchasing department, at the department level, at the company level, the total organizational level, even at the individual buyer level, what we know is 80% of the dollars that are spent are usually spent on less than 10% of the things that are purchased. Or another way for me to say that, the 80% of the total dollars spent on an annual basis is spent with less than 10% of the top suppliers. And we name that particular category of spend the category A, spend. Of course, it's a critical category because it's where all the money is. 80% of all the money spent is in this A category. But of equal importance, especially if an organization is trying to switch from just being a tactical, clerical, what I call a getting department, to an actual high-quality supply management department, that C category is extremely important to understand as well. Because if you notice in the slide, 75% of what we buy, if we add up the annual volume, only adds up to 5% of the total. Or another way for us to say this is 75% of the suppliers we deal with, if we took their annual total, added it together, it's only 5% of the spend. So in the world of procurement, what we find is that most purchasing departments, instead of focusing on the A's category where all the money is, we generally find most of the time is spent in the C category. So that brings us into this category of procurement that I call the getters. Getters really don't buy things, they just get things. And when we look at how getters spend their time, 10% of a getter's time is spent on A's, but 75% of a getter's time is spent on the C's. Contrast that with how real buyers, experts in supply management, how do they spend their time? The slide will show you that a real buyer, someone who really knows purchasing best practices, will spend 80% of their time on the A's, and only 5% of their time will be spent on the C's. In other words, if we're really looking at cost savings, which is what this program, this is what you asked me to talk about, how do we really get good cost savings? Well, first we've got to make this definition. What are the A's, the B's, and the C's? And then we focus on the A items for our price down, our price reductions, our reduction programs. This is where we focus our commodity teams. Our category management basically should be focused in this A category spend. For the C's, we've really got to work on the C's to improve the processes. We want the processes to be simple, fast, hopefully we can take the entire need to pay cycle on the Cs and automate the entire thing so that purchasing people are not really spending time on the C categories. Sort of a shorthand for that, what I usually tell companies when I'm working on consulting projects is, and sometimes we have to do this first before we can even work on the A's, we have to get the buyer's time. Most buyers I know are already heavily loaded. There's not any extra time. They're so busy working on C's that they have very little time to work on the A's. So one of the things I certainly encourage every procurement department to do is put together a task force and focus on getting rid of your C's. I don't mean that literally. You still have to buy them, of course.
Yeah.
But the fact is we want it so that you don't have to spend much time on them. Purchasing doesn't have to spend much time on them. But we even want to do such a good job of changing the process so not even the end users have to spend much time. In other words, let's really get rid of the C's in so many, there's so many ways to do this, but I think first I want to show you how to do this ABC analysis. It's simple. We use the Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. Generally, when I do these, and I have to do them for a lot of my clients, we go to the accounts payable department because really there's no other data in most companies of the total purchases. Purchasing may have some of it, but there's many of the indirect spend that purchasing may not have captured. So the first thing we do is get a list from accounts payable of all the money spent in the last 12 months. And they usually give us this by suppliers because they don't have it by parts or by what we buy. But we'll get as much information as accounting has. And what we do is we throw all this in an Excel spreadsheet. We ask accounting to give it to us in an Excel format. And what we then do, the first step is to sort the spend in descending order from the top down. So that's what you're seeing in the third column that you're looking at, is the annual spend for all the items and services purchased by supplier. You could have done it by parts if you had it that way. But generally we're going to do this in both ways as time goes on. So you can see that we've got it sorted in descending order. In the next column, actually the fourth column you're looking at, what you're going to see there is we've done an accumulated total of the annual dollars. So we've taken each row and accumulated the rows above. So in the first row, of course, there's nothing above the 22 spend, so the accumulated total in the first row is 22. But in the second row, we add 22 plus 14 to get 36. So we've accumulated the first two rows, and then we will add the third row. So 36 plus 10 will equal to 46, and we move on down the column until at the very end, we have the total accumulated spend, which should equal the total spend that was in the third column. So those two columns have to equal up. Like I said, it's easy to do. We put together a replicating formula in Excel, and it'll do it very quickly. Then in the fifth column, what I'm doing there is I wanted the accumulated total percent of the total annual dollars. What I really want to see is in that first row, what percentage of that first row, what percentage is that spend of the total spend? So I divide the 22 by 56.9, which is the total spend, and I see that already in the first spend, I've already spent 38% of the total spend. Now I take the accumulated total of the annual dollars, 36, and I'm going to divide it by 56.9. So in the first two items, I've already total up 63% of the total spend. When I get to 80%, I'm going to draw a line. And everything above that line are going to be A's. So now I have my A category identified. When I get to 90, I'm going to move on down the accumulated total percent of total annual dollars line. And when I get to 95%, I'm going to draw another line. Everything between those two lines will be B's, and everything below that line will be my C category. Now the C category, as I said, those are the ones that we want to automate as much as possible every step of the need to pay cycle. We need to get these out of our buyers' load so that the buyers will have a lot more time to focus on the A's. Frankly, Arton, if you think about it, even if we cut the price of the C spend in half, which we said was only 5% of the total spend, it will have very little impact on the organization. But if we save only a few percent on the A category spend, of course we will have a sizable impact on the organization. So it's pretty obvious that we really need to move in this direction, and we need to move in this direction fast, because most of all of our organizations need to cut cost so that we can stay competitive. If you want to see the results of something like this, what I'm showing you now is a complete spend analysis, an ABC analysis by category. You can see on the far left we have actually a whole group of commodity segments. We've divided the total spend into these segments. Each one of these commodities are for a different kind of spend. You will see at the far right that this company's talking about 24,000 different items that it buys at a total of about $90 million a year. Down below you will see their ABC analysis. Again, you can see the 80% of the spend is spent on 9.3% of those 24,000 items. Look at the C category. 5% of the total spend is spent on 65% of what they buy. You can see in the C column, this gets quite interesting, because you can see that in the C column of our spend category data, over 16,000 items make up only $4 million of spend. But move over to that A category, take a look at it. 2,000 items make up $72 million of the spend. So it's pretty obvious where we need to focus when we want to save money. So what do? Well, we have to get time for the purchasing people in this particular department. I won't go into the whole history of this particular group, but I can tell you what we decided to do. One of the first things we said is we're not going to be able to accomplish much. We're not going to be able to implement best practices until we start to get rid of the C's. So if you look at the C category spend, it's pretty easy to see which one we should go focus on first to give people more time. If you look at that commodity M, there's over 7,000 items being purchased, and the total value of those 7,000 is only about 1.7 million. So right away we went after that group and we said, let's really simplify this. Let's simplify it so that we can get more time, because it's almost 1/3 of what gets bought. So we went and we worked on the M's, and then we worked on the next high value, which was the commodity C, which had over 3,000 items, and again under $1 million. And we systematically attacked those C's to make it simple. We set up systems to let end users obtain those items, and we set up other methods of getting rid of those C's. After we did that, we could certainly now become a lot more strategic. We went to the A group. We said, okay, now we really got to start saving some money. And of course, when we looked at the A group, we said, which one would be the biggest bang for our effort? If you looked at the commodity L, that jumped right at us. There's $22 million spent in that one category alone, and there's only 50 items. So that, of course, represents a big opportunity for savings. And we attacked that one with some strategies and came up almost in a very short period with over a $3 million savings in that category alone. So I encourage, of course, all procurement departments. When I do what we call a gap analysis, which is one of the seminars that we hold at Purchasing in the Procurement Center, when we do the two-bay gap analysis program, of course, we point this as being one of the more essential activities so that we will have a lot more time to implement best practices.
All right, Robbie, thank you very much. I believe we spent about half an hour. And before ending this webinar, I just wanted to mention to everybody that we do with Robbie 2 special workshops which focus on cost itself. One is directly related to cost reduction, but another one is on price and cost analysis. So Robbie, could you tell us, I mean, if you're half an hour with just 2 strategies, there are so many things that can be touched for 2 days for such courses. Could you tell us actually how people can benefit from coming and attending your live courses?
Well, other than that it's fun to get to meet each other,
Yeah,
it's certainly a lot of fun to get to meet other people that are in your profession. So the networking is great. Food's pretty good too.
Yep.
But basically, I guess I have to sort of approach this from my observation that everybody negotiates with suppliers, but frankly, Arjun, it's pretty hard to negotiate with a supplier unless you really understand cost and price analysis. In other words, how did the supplier really come up with the price? What are the elements of a price? Do we really understand what are direct materials and indirect materials? Do we understand how suppliers come up with their overheads and allocate their overheads? There are so many areas that can be negotiated with a supplier, but you must understand price analysis and cost analysis and how to even develop what should something cost. And I'm not talking about the budgetary estimates that most organizations have. I mean, really understand what should this item or service really cost the organization. One of the questions I get all the time is, Robbie, can we require the supplier to give us a price breakdown? And of course the answer is yes. And good best practices would make that a part of any request for quote, that the supplier give you a price breakdown. But of course you got to know what to do with the breakdown. You have to understand what you're seeing and what you're working on. We spend a lot of time in that area on our price and cost analysis program. The other program, the program about cost reductions and cost reporting, again, is another area where we know that procurement's all about saving money, but it's surprising how few organizations really even have a formal process to report savings. And what kind of savings, or even a definition for savings. I get this question all the time. Robbie, what really constitutes a savings? Well, in this program, one of the things I'm going to give you in this program is a cost reduction procedure, and we're going to make very clear definitions of what is a cost reduction, and then we're going to certainly make everybody understand that there's another category of savings that we call cost avoidance, and how important it is to really work on that area. Then in this program, we actually cover about 20 or so different ways of coming up with cost savings, what we would just call cost reduction methods. We'll have a list of about over 40 different things that procurement departments usually do to find savings. So that's really just a thumbnail of those 2 programs. We actually have a lot of fun in them because we hear what other people are doing to save money, and we get ideas from the participants. So hope people will join us in those 2 programs that will be held relatively soon.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. So again, Robbie, I'd like to thank you for being here with us, and I trust everybody out there would have learned something from these sessions, and definitely looking forward to see everybody out there who's watching this to come and attend the webinar from Robbie. Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you, Arjun.
Click the link below to get full information and program details about when and where the live trainings and seminars on cost reduction in purchasing plus price cost analysis will run.